We do a lot of industry forecasts. So as people are talking about like the notice creative economy, the beauty of that is it's an industry. It changes in industry. And NAICS codes and industry codes are one lens to look at what's happening. But in any industry, whether it's creative, construction, or anything else, there's a mix of staffing patterns, right? So folks can be accountants or lawyers or administrative staff across every industry. So when the Otis report says entertainment digital media is growing at X% year over year, that's important and that should guide policy making. But it's a mix of staffing positions, right? It's not 3% growth in directors and producers only. And so what excited us about this project with Mount SAC is the idea of diving down and unpacking the relationship between occupational growth and its relationship to industry growth. And what's interesting is over time, that mix is changing. So in the past, there was a world in which a lot of those creative occupations were, the Venn diagram was nested in creative. Over time, we have seen those begin to spread out. We have tons of examples, and it shows up in the empirical data that a lot of the LMI uses as backbone, but it's often not understood and clear. So this report in June, I hope, is going to be one of many that really empower all of you, because the myths that are up here are absolutely, like, this isn't, we're not doing, charity work by advocating for these positions. You're not. And I feel like sometimes, Mark mentioned, like, the fake stuff, like, there is just as much firepower behind wage growth, job growth in the state of California, compared to probably things that people normally do. So industries and occupations, that's kind of the nexus we talk about. Each of them being important, industry being the way work is done. So intellectual property, things like that are very important. And occupation is not having rote output. So think about a film editor or a graphic designer. The output day to day in terms of tasks, that's subtly shifted. And it is an important kind of a feature of the work, especially when we get into questions about what's going to be automated and what's not. Next slide. So I just want to, again, just in our limited time today, I want to talk about 4 things that I think about that are going to be kind of threaded throughout this report in June. One is just flagging, hey, like, let me show you when you bundle up the right things, whether you use the, everybody has the platform of choice, like, it is there. Whether you subscribe to MZ, JobsEQ, like all the little workarounds we have, you got to know how to make the drop-down menus work, because they're not going to spit out always what you need, especially if you look to folks that are self-employed, a lot of entrepreneurs. In Southern California, especially, the way unions operate and the intermediate payroll providers throws a wrench in the way the EDD rolls up that data. Conversation for after this, because it's important and it's complicated, but you're not always getting a clear picture, and we're trying to help empower folks to make that clear. The second thing is transferable skill set. What's really cool and what we see, and I'm going to show a little bit today, is that when you train for these occupations, there is a really important adjacent set of skills. So if the parent is in your office saying, oh, I'm not sure, like, graphic design, or like, I want to stick that trade of some sort, like, there are actually many more off-ramps than oftentimes in healthcare or manufacturing in terms of adjacent. And that is a case that can be empirically shown. And again, depending on what data set is your preference and who you think your stakeholders are going to do, that's a burning glass argument that can be made. That is an ONET, God forbid, a case that can be made. But it is a case that could be made, and we are here to try to champion that. As I mentioned, automation. This is really important. For all the things we get excited about in tech, there are a subset of those that, by virtue of what they are, because it is code and you are substituting pieces of code, like, there's a higher automation risk in a lot of those. So they've got a shorter time horizon on what we're training folks for and how long that's going to be there. Finally, I just want to talk about the value proposition that I see talking to a lot of creative employers across the state for the community. You know, it is not a world anymore where you have to go to a four-year art school, pay $200,000 and get in debt in order to get these positions. It's just not. In fact, folks are hungry for people that can be on the ground with the changing nature of technology. You see that especially in the film industry in Southern California with virtual production. The entire supply chain, from pre-development to production to post-production, is being changed by LED technology, a lot of underlying gaming equipment and systems, and it's going to be a different world. And you know, a faculty meeting at a four-year institution in the film department, it takes a while for those talks to get going and make some changes. So employers are really hungry. And I think the community college, especially the program, really like to plug right in. Next slide. So I rolled up. So we talked in SOC codes in this conference oftentimes. I said, let's roll up to those major SOC codes and take a look at our 5-year forecast for those codes across California. I want to flag right off the bat, both computer and mathematical occupations, which is unusual before we were flagging some growth there that's really relevant to this conversation. But for the most part, one of those 23 codes being arts, design, entertainment, sports, and media. So again, right off the bat, thinking about those myths that Deja flagged that come up in her conversation, I juxtapose against what we're looking at for all occupations over the next slide. This EDD was the most recent quarter of the median wage, the $23 there at the bottom. And these occupations, not only raw numbers, so bodies or slots that bodies need to be in, but also those median hourly earnings. And so you're well above, again, making the case that these positions are very much competitive compared to what we forecast over the next 5 years and what the EDD says is the most recent all occupation median wage. Next slide. The other thing I want to flag that I think is important that probably comes up in economic circles more than workforce circles, but I do want to flag. So we've probably been to a lot of conferences over the past 10 years, and we've talked about challenges in healthcare occupations, healthcare support occupations. That's a good example of what's called a local cluster. The economists think about industry and work that's done as either local facing, so serving people in a place in a time, or those that are traded, meaning there's a global marketplace for things like haircuts, those are local. Healthcare, those are local. What is the cap on job growth in those industries? The humans that make up the geography. So, you know, while we're all struggling right now with healthcare, as soon as the baby boomer retirement peaks, there is going to be a different cap on the amount of demand that is needed in healthcare, just because the bodies in a place are not going to be pushing the demand side of the equation as much as they are now. The same with lots of different things, right? Max out on haircuts based on the number of heads with hair in a region. What's different is the creative industries and occupations, right? The cap on growth is really driven by two major things. High-speed internet access around the globe, penetration of high-speed internet access and mobile devices. And those markets continue to grow as those two pieces of infrastructure make their way around the world, right? If you're reporting video content, written word, any sort of the creative output we talk about, the barriers to that being consumed around the globe are little to none. And so it's got a big growth opportunity that Californians can seize on just as markets continue to grow. Whereas things like maybe a healthcare, other locally created services just have a natural cap on what the demand is. So unpacking that art occupation, I want to say that, you know, sometimes economists deny the statistic. I would just unpack it to show there's a lot of diverse growth there, right? When we look at film and video editors, what are we looking at in terms of the next 5 years? Over 3,000, median hourly wage is 42%. Art directors, a little over 4,000, 2583 again, still above that all occupational median wage, being half of the wages are above, half are below. Craft artists, special effects artists, and animators, exhibit designers, broadcast technicians. All of these really being signaled in a different way than a four-year degree. These are oftentimes around portfolios of work, experience, software competency. There's a lot of things that are employers aren't hanging on every four-year degree that comes past. They need people that can do the work, and I think that's again the community college is an asset in the community where people can plug in and immediately be placed across industry with some of these skill sets. I just use one example, and I think this is the thing that no forecast is going to show you. Right? The very secret of economic forecasting is that we use the past to predict the future, and that runs into a lot of problems, as you can imagine. It's probably why we sometimes feel like we're going around in circles. What is the new hot? Oh, for the jobs or this, you know, we use the past to predict the future, and so we've got to be very careful and very humble about what we know. But what I would say, and what we are seeing a very important trend around, is the mix of occupations starting to lead across industry sectors. I have hundreds of examples. This one I love just because it's so interesting. So this is a VR simulation company for surgeons, medical students, etc. I just pulled out a few of the examples on how to utilize their platform, how they plug in with some of the staff folks they're using. They talk about storyboarding. They talk about digital assets. Where are we finding storyboarding? Not at the NABE's healthcare industry, so normally, right? When we think about where that kid is going to plug in that's doing an art or an illustration program, community college. But that is exactly the skill set. You think that people know what a storyboard is? Probably not. And so this is just one example about how we're seeing that mix, that nexus of industry and occupation start to shift over time. You can think about it across all things. I was taking a shower when I first checked in, and I was looking at the design on the soap container. I was like, oh, this is soap, right? But like, that is how products in our economy are differentiated, right? Like, how things like that matters. Your social media, your engagement across a number of platforms, that matters, and it's bundled into what products see and which ones sell in the marketplace. And you're seeing the creative being demanded in a lot of places. We're an economist. I would be lost without our design people, right? My product would not be as good if it was just what was on my Word document. It's made to look a lot better, and that is part of what makes companies succeed. It's the same like when you build a building. The architect is important. Why? Because you need to differentiate your product from the market. And so that makes firms succeed. You can see it here, and you see it a lot of places. Next slide. 5 years ago, I was in front of a couple of different crowds talking about the creative economy, and we were talking about gaming. And there was always kind of a sigh and an eye roll, and you know, this 30-year-old economist, he's whatever. I use this as an example about the metaverse and what is happening and what is coming. Epic Games, so Fortnite, if anybody's Fortnite, they are seed funding the MIT Center for Real Estate Innovation, right? This is one of hundreds and hundreds of grants that they are putting out in the world because that's where they see their product being used over time. They start out at Fortnite and end at the MIT Center for Real Estate Innovation and beyond. And so I think we've got to really start taking it seriously. It's probably not going to necessarily be Facebook. Maybe it will. I don't know. But Epic Games and some of these underlying Unreal Engines and these platforms that are opening up for developers are really going to revolutionize a lot of different spaces, including events, conferences, things like this. Next slide. So as I mentioned, transferable skill sets. In the report in June, we're going to really break out a number of these. I tried to pick a few examples, art directors being one that maybe parents would get nervous about it to talk about being an art director. Whether you're using ONET, data straight from Glassdoor, any of the things that your stakeholders are comfortable with, you can make the case of the overlapping competencies where you, let's say, your son or daughter, your student, maybe they take the classes, take the coursework, they're not going to be backed into a cul-de-sac they can't get out of. This is index we compute around adjacent occupation, and there are a lot of opportunities. closer to 100, I mean, same occupation. And so there are a lot of off-ramps where you don't see it in a lot of other occupations, healthcare, just transportation. It doesn't offer quite as many off-ramps in terms of the ability to navigate and change both personal or in the marketplace. Next slide. Same here, I just did multimedia artists and animators. Again, off-ramps to graphic design, film and video editing, document management, fashion design, photographers, photographers. Copywriters, video game designers, search market strategists. Again, I think it's very important for a lot of constituents that may have parents, family members, extended family members that there are opportunities that aren't just the specific occupation. They're very tightly related in ways you just don't see across all occupational categories. Final thing I want to say, and I want to make this case over to make it for the next decade, I'm sure. But the nexus of the occupation and the programming and the industry. When I put up producers and directors, it's one of the largest growing occupations in California. It's got a great wave. People are immediately like, are you going to send these kids off to try to do student skills? No. They are in lots of places. In another slide deck, I talk about the GIS company in the Redlands, hiring a whole bunch of podcast producers. Those are producers because they are moving their content and thought leadership into different areas. You see it with Salesforce. Salesforce is standing up an entire in-house film company. You see it with Experian. They have, if I was to take the name off of the credit agency, you think, oh, they're hiring a director of film. No, it's at the credit agency because they need those people to bring that work to make their content available. And you just see here, thinking about art directors, you know, or even special effects artists and animators, maybe you think, okay, my student's going to go into that. Only 45% of them are going to land in motion picture and video. The rest are going to be in software publishing, which is often a catch-all. So the new things start to come out 2022 for a lot of broadcasting activities, but they are scattered across a ton of industry. And so we've got to be subtly aware of those kind of nexus because they're just different trajectories, especially for like film editing, areas where there may be union membership that may be very different if you're going down one career pathway or another one. So a film and video editor wouldn't need to join the local IOTC to work at an advertising agency, but they might if they want to work in television, broadcast, and other places. And that matters, right? That system, in order to help them be successful, needs some transparency as well in terms of like, what are the next steps that I need to get a union membership. Next slide. So also in the same way we can calculate adjacencies and occupations, the final one I just want to flag and I mentioned is reduced risk of automation. So economy-wide being indexed to 100, anything above 100 is more likely to be risks of automation over the next decade. Just in part, it's a breakdown of the daily tasks. And I don't think that always maps on how people do the thing, but in terms of daily tasks, part of the job that can be automated, you can calculate it. And again, you see that arts, design, and entertainment actually does quite well in terms of not training people up for something that is going to be easily automated. You still need that unique creativity and non-uniform output over time. Next time. So I just end with, I'm a big fan coming from where I sit of you being the prime assets to really take advantage of what is a lot of growth that's coming down the pipe. This is, again, it's across industry. We're seeing video production. We're seeing a lot of creative activity in non-creative spaces. And so, whereas some of the four-year programs struggle to turn the ship quick enough to lean in, it's going to be really important, I think, for community colleges to step in and play a role. And especially after and maybe combining with things like the A and B clusters coming from high schools in California, as those kind of have apprenticeship programs standing up, I think it's really important that the community colleges can kind of plug in there as well. Next slide. With that, I will conclude. I would just say kind of 4 takeaways that I think about and try to be an evangelist for is occupations don't live in a vacuum. I think sometimes thinking about soft codes, the only lens, we think that they do. And it's really that occupation and industry nexus where you're going to plug people in. There needs to be an understanding of, you know, it's not just enough to stand up a program and call it new media. Like employers don't know what that means. You've got to make sure there is a nexus of something that is usually communicated with those employers in the market, because they probably have the skills. We're just not dog whistling right to them in how we name some of these things and stay too attached to like stock code language. Finally, looking to the past is not enough. Everybody's forecasts are going to be wrong in terms of that staffing mix. They bounce around like crazy over the past couple of years. The BLS has 30 pages of footnotes on take their occupation forecast with heavy dose of salt. Until this shakes out, we're not going to have a good sense empirically, but what is available now is strong enough to make the case in a lot of these regions. The final thing I would say, not looking to the past, is for community colleges in non-coastal, non-urban areas. Work from home across a lot of these industries is becoming very real. You're seeing it in animation, you're seeing it in sound design, you're seeing it in a whole host of things, where companies are now finally getting the kinks out of cross time zone, cross jurisdiction teams. And so I think for folks that may have reasons to stay in smaller communities, these opportunities aren't making them move to the coast. Bringing in a portfolio of work, bringing in some skills, especially in software and related competencies, so huge as a provide opportunities to people that might not have thought just because of geography, they weren't going to be a good fit. I would say the final thing is it's really important to use the proof position. The growth on the demand side of the supply and demand equation is really good. As barriers continue to fall, content and the way it is consumed, not only in content specific industries, but across a number of industries. Again, I wouldn't have thought 5 years ago a GIS firm would think they needed podcast content to do. I didn't know my credit report needed video production, they do. So that is the real, we need to think really seriously about how community colleges can play an important role. With that, I will turn it back to our family to the So, if you want to make a living, don't become prior to hearing all of that data. An artist, yeah, an artist, musicians, television, a writer. Some might take that would be commonly held. These are widely held systems. I deal with it all the time as being talking to parents of current students and perspectives. I want my kids to be, I want them to be able to make good questions. I don't want them to go into it. But the data is clear. No, I always give you data. I always have that conversation is always driven by data because my opinion doesn't matter. But the data, they can't outrun the data. The data is real. And that's why this report that we're going to release and make it available to anybody who wants it is so important. Facts the data. I've often given those parents notice the report of the creative center. It's very thick and very detailed. But it doesn't so that's our report that
And those jobs are expanding and they're changing. A couple of years ago, I met with the owner of a recording studio in Los Angeles called NRC. NRC is one of the top A-list recording studios. The recording studios are going through a difficult time because now everybody can have a recording studio in their bedroom, and many of us do, or live in my case. And so the big recording studio at $500 an hour, who's going to rent the time? The recording studios had to figure out what are we going to do to survive. We've got to do something that the person with the home recording studio can't do. And here's what they decided to do. I asked them, what are you looking for from entry-level employees? They said, well, first I need them to know how to run a recording studio and be an engineer, get good sound recording. However, I also need to have them know their way around a video camera because they're going to produce and direct and shoot the promotional video for the artists. And oh, by the way, recording studios now enter into what they call 360 degree art. What does that mean? If you want to be a recording star, you actually enter into contact with a recording studio, not a talent, with a studio. And then they take care of everything in your career. So that means the recording, which they've always traditionally done, but promotional videos, they schedule the tour, they manage the tour, they hire the bands for the tour, they deal with the marketing, they cover everything. So what are you looking for from entry-level employees? They got to do marketing, video production, audio production, managing, from an entry-level employee. What soft code does that do? Yeah.
They also need
and that's where all of our fields of really creative kind of get this all going and blending. And the traditional barriers are no longer there anymore. All of these different skill sets are kind of blending into the whole. And that's what our recording is. And we hope to have this report out every year to mirror those things. As Adam noted, economists predict future based on the past, which is why it's happened much more. But not this way. But if we can do this each year, we can have our finger on the pulse at least to drive our students. And that data you can take back to all of your administrators and senior executives at colleges. Because here's where we need to go and use the data. Data. We cannot improve without data.
So asked about using the data as at least the case, but are parents in particular buying this data, or do you have to still switch it around? Okay, you could be an architect who is STEAM-related and STEM-related, or is it okay to be totally non?
Great question. So here's the thing: the parents are making an emotional argument, right? I'm afraid my kids will fail, broke, live with me until they're 50, whatever the answer is, right? And the argument I'm making is factual, data-driven, and undermines that emotional argument. To a great extent, they don't give up on it completely, but they have to begin to trust the data. Solid foundation.
Real data. I want to hear. Your program.
Yeah, here. Great point. So the data that we're putting out is wide data and industry based as well. statewide and regional. But it's going to be up to every school to practice, and that can be challenging, especially if you have what we call job hours. People that count track come and they take 3 classes, get the entry level job, and they're gone. And they're gone. That is not because they don't want to continue it, because now they're working. And our program hasn't adapted to provide them with ongoing education opportunities while they're working. So sure. It is. It is. But we want to continue to follow them as they continue to go up the pay scale and they're successful in their career. So it's up to us as a college to focus on that fact. It's up to us to track them while they're in school, create that ongoing relationship so that when they leave, we continue to have that conversation. And we have things going on at our college that their needs or possibly retraining or just having that community that when they're out there 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, we still know where they are and we still have that relationship. We continue to report that data. But that's not what this report is going to do. This report is going to give you the solid foundation and the not worry about that. Then each individual school has to go in their.
But from work, right? What is it? If we have the data back at the parent doctor, and you say, okay, we're going to tell them this program, and by the way, we're going to hire Ellen, whatever you do to practice 2 hours in the community. Get those things don't have that is a problem. So we're hoping the architect will do their job. The data plays into
If the school isn't successful in training students for those specific industries, then the school has to make a decision whether they want to raise student research and create better programs. So train the students, and we can then be successful.
How do you define success? A good example for me is like, yeah, I was a communication studies major. My job involved a lot of writing, but I'm not really in a creative industry. I'm in education. So is that, was that people who are doing that, people who are doing that, people who are trying to convince me to go into an English major, am I a success or am I not? So I'm not an English a writer or
That sounds like some. I would consider you a success. I don't know if that's a.
Parent, like, there's a student major in English then if they want to be a writer and now I'm not a writer.
Yeah, we've got. I'm gonna get in trouble. We've got to be careful on mapping out career pathways at the time. I have you like the other day I was sitting in a session when we were talking about using the LinkedIn data. I know that LinkedIn data is intimately as anyone. You like smoke, like maybe what is this like? You're gonna be flooded with information. I'm not sure it's gonna like tell you like human beings do not have like, linear career pathways over time. There are too many intermediate. There are too many variables, and it's just like not the right question. So like, no, people are gonna bounce around. I think that's part of what I was flagging on like the adjacent bounces that like aren't going to be the most miserable hard bounce. Like some things that maybe like family need to move or like all the other things like you're well positioned for things that are also growing. So, you know, I think you're a success. Hopefully the community college system does too. one of the questions I have, any questions came out of the program on CI. People are doing this, they know this going as a teacher. How do you hire the people you need that have a high level of confidence in the college system? Basically, pretty much happening. We can't hire electricians or machinists, so how are we going to hire these creative people?
As an instructor in the creative economy and the arts, who's now teaching the community college system, for some of your more traditional disciplines, graphic design, technical theater, TV, film, it's a gig economy. Your hook is the steady, safe, you can count on this income. And that's why I ended up here. I was working professionally at union jobs around Chicago and around Los Angeles right after graduate school, and was making slightly more money than I was my first year of teaching. But I always had to worry about, do I have a gig in 2 months? Do I know where my paycheck's going to be in 3 months and 4 months? Do I have those contracts lined up? It for me and for many that choose to go into education in these fields, it's the safety net of having it and knowing that as long as you don't work them obnoxious overtime or overload, they can still find the gigs outside as well.
Well, and that's what I was going to hit on. You can also, as a dean who's hiring, whether it be adjunct or full-time faculty, we have many of our faculty in certain areas that are also still not working. So whether it's, especially now with different modes of delivering the information with the last one CL and stuff like that, it actually provides good content. So there is still that ability. I had a question now with respect to this. So I'm looking at, we've talked a lot about. Yeah. You talked a lot about the arts. Is this going to contain information on some of these other jobs? I mean, not jobs, but areas such as the sheet metal and so on.
That's a great question. And using Mount San Antonio College as an example, obviously the arts division is directly related to creative economy. You are the dean of the business division. You have disciplines in your division that are related to creative economy. Fashion design, culinary arts, creative design, yeah. So there's a second division in that. And we've got our technology and health division as well as that. And of course, there's electronics and other technical fields that are absolutely related. You cannot mount a movie without electricians and carpenters and other skilled trades. So there's the third division. We have our kinesiology, athletics, and dance division. Right in the title, there's dance. So there's 4 divisions right off the top of that will be positively impacted by this report, not just the arts division. We're starting with a fairly narrow scope on this report, more related to the arts, but as we continue to expand and as the data collection, labor market data collection improves, we're going to broaden that scope and broaden that definition. If somebody's an electrician, are they automatically in the creative economy? Well, maybe not, but there are many electricians working in Los Angeles, Francisco, metropolitan areas around the state where those folks in trade do work in those creative fields. So you're capturing that.
Yeah, I mean, it just, the matrices get really out of control really quick in terms of what you're trying to say. So it really does have to be kind of anchored to what you're hearing on the ground. Like if there are faculty, if there are people in the industry that are saying something, the part I think what breaks my heart is when you've got real-time information from the field and you're not able to make the case internally. So if we take carpenters, for example, if we look nationally at the staffing patterns, for example, the motion picture and sound NAICS codes, at the national level, there is a percentage of that total employment that is carpenters. And those are the people, but that is a giant matrix. And you have to do that in a lot of places to pinpoint and advocate around the thing you're hearing. And so like television and film productions are the worst. in terms of like not accurately being captured. So you can think about all the different parts of the film. Caterers, where does that job live? Where does lighting, where does construction, set design, hair and makeup, you know, not only the industry code, but the SOC code as well. So like costume designers, hair and makeup, they're not even in the damn arts and entertainment. Of course they're not. They're down in professional or personal services. So that like, you know, we're trying to navigate, and that's like what we get up in the morning and get excited about people, because oftentimes like not even quite sure how to make the case. And I never, I would say, don't not listen to, you know, people on the ground, because that often, you know, where the locus of real time, you know, it's not going to show up at the end of the day. Like UCW drives a lot of this, like that's based on unemployment insurance filings in California, and so it's really a challenge. I'll tell you the second one where there's a little bit of hell raising to be had is around whether it's ONET or any of the data portals from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, where you go in and do your drop down and it says, oh, you need a bachelor's degree. Unless it's like an architect or a doctor, red flag on that data. Because that is, let me tell you, and it took me my first 5 years, I was out reading what was on the thing. Who's the director? That is based on the American Community Survey, which is an annual census product, which only captures the world as it is. And we all know in a lot of the arts, like equity has not been a priority in hiring. And so, you know, wherever people have the bachelor's degree is just coming with the person they survey. So they're saying, as of the last data we collected in your community, X% of producers and directors had a bachelor's degree. In no way is that speaking to skills needed. And we are now at a point where, because of like labor market challenges, like people are moving beyond the bachelor's degree. And so I think trying to turn the ship of the community college system is just so vitally important now, because like people are already primed to say, oh, I don't need a bachelor's, this guy's got a controller, she knows this software platform, let's go. Like, so I would just flag, like, there's not one, it's just too complicated in terms of like one Bible to like solve all these problems, but like you can drill down and make cases around things for good. Any other questions? Just curious what kind of advisory board or the improvement spending all the time to greater figure out. Our problem in Walnut, which is probably the problem for quite a few colleges, is the proximity or lack thereof to where these institutes actually are. And we're trying to solve that in a number of ways. And of course, technology helps. Zoom is a great tool. There are folks around Hollywood or from the TV who are more than happy to get back and want to solve, but they're not going to drive out the component to do it because LA traffic patterns are what they are. And I think that's probably true in most major metropolitan areas. So use technology. But in our case, we've been fairly successful. All of our clients and greater recognition.
But so many of these jobs. More art programs in the world. Nothing is special like this. So this is something that we're interested in. Engage in research. And after we talk to Los Angeles, we can start to talk about it.
So we encourage you to write us the top of the report that all three, and then read through it, use it, tell us your feedback. Where is it working? Where can we make changes that are true to Thank you.